Brian, decided not today. I recognize that forum of the board is present. Pension Review Board will now come to order. I'll ask Ms. McLaughlin to please call roll.
Stephanie Levy.
Here.
Keith Brainerd.
Here.
Marcia Dush.
Here.
Christopher Gonzalez.
Here.
Daniel Harper.
Here.
Roy Rodriguez.
Here.
Christopher Zook.
Here.
All members are present at today's meeting. Moving on to agenda item 3 for administrative matters. We have consideration of the minutes from the December 11th, 2025 board meeting. Members have all received the minutes at the last meeting. Do we have any comments or corrections to the minutes as circulated? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as circulated.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Mrs. Dush, second by Mr. Brainerd to approve the minutes as circulated. Any discussion from the board? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays? The ayes have it. The minutes are approved as circulated. Moving on to committee assignments. Within the last year, we had two new members who joined the board, and we had one member leave the board. Our committee memberships do need some adjustments to fill vacancies and allow for sufficient conduct of committee business. We have a busy year of board and committee work, and these assignments will allow board staff to complete several important projects throughout the year. The committee assignments for 2026 will be as follows. For the Actuarial Committee, Keith Brainerd Chair, Marcia Dush, and Daniel Harper. Investment Committee, Christopher Zook Chair, Chris Gonzalez, and Stephanie Levy. And the Educational Committee, Marcia Dush Chair, Chris Gonzalez, and Roy Rodriguez. Moving on for our election of Vice Chair, since this is the first meeting of 2026, our board bylaws require that we elect Vice Chair. We do want to recognize Mr. Brainerd for his dedicated service as Vice Chair of the Pension Review Board for 2025 and previous years. At this time, I will call for nominations for the position of Vice Chair for the year of 2026. Would the board like to make any nominations for Vice Chair?
I nominate Mr. Brainerd.
Any other nominations? There are no other nominations for Vice Chair. The nominations are now closed. Any discussion from the board? Very good. We have a nomination for Vice Chair for Mr. Brainerd. All in favor of electing Mr. Brainerd as Vice Chair, say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Mr. Brainerd is selected for Vice Chair for 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Appreciate your confidence.
At this time, we have an agenda item just to provide any opening remarks for board members. This is an opportunity for the board to provide any remarks before we get into any other items on today's agenda. Would anyone like to say anything at this time? Very good. Since there are no remarks, we will move forward into public comment. We will now accept public comments. All public comments are limited to 3 minutes. If there's anyone in the public or in the audience, in person or virtually, who has any comments they would like to present to the board, now is the time. No public comments. We'll move on to item number 6, and I will turn it over to Mr. Brainerd to walk us through Actuarial Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I'd like to ask Deputy Staff Actuary David Fee to come forward to present item 6A, which is the materials in your book. It's the actuarial evaluation funding soundness restoration plan reports. Mr. Fee, welcome.
Good morning, I'm David Fee, the staff actuary, here to present the actuarial evaluation report and FSRP report. Today we'll go over changes since the December board meeting with system news, including some new systems and some terminating systems, major assumption changes for 2 systems. For funding progress, we'll take a longer view than we have been in the past, so you can really see the significant progress that has been made. For system overview, we'll review key metrics by system type. We'll look at a list of systems with outlier statistics, such as longest funding periods and lowest funded ratios. We'll also look at TELFRA sponsor contribution considerations related to the cost to fund a firefighter pension versus a pension for general employees. And we'll look at an update on the lump sum assumption discussions. Then for the FSRP report, we'll look at changes since the December board meeting, as well as a full list of systems for each risk category. For pending system news, Corpus Christi Fire did what we like to see. They had an increase in benefits and they paid for it up front. In this case, the city increased contributions by 1% for a period of 12 years. Dallas Police and Fire has a final agreement between the city and system. It's been fully approved by all parties. We did receive a new valuation report a few days ago that reflects that agreement, but they have not actually submitted an FSRP, so you will still see them on those lists. Marshall Fire completed their FSRP, and Texarkana Fire has approved increased contributions for both the members and cities, so they should avoid any FSRP. We have several new and terminated systems. Anson General Hospital terminated their plan. We've also had our actuarial intern looking at all county and special districts to see if they have a public pension plan that is not through TCDRS. And so far, she has found 2. One was Brown County Water Improvement District, which we are still working on getting a hold of. And then Dallas County Utility and Reclamation District, which has newly registered with us. And then lastly, North Texas Municipal Water District, when they changed actuaries, their new actuary informed them that they should be sending documents to the PRB, so we're working with them on registering them.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, considering the experience that we've had recent years with the Nacogdoches Hospital District closing their plans, may I ask that kindly to get us the actuarial information on the Anson General Hospital plan? Well,
so when they terminate, we ask them for information regarding what normally what happens is they transfer all the liabilities to an insurance company, and we ask for documentation of that, and then we ask for documentation of what the assets look like after they've transferred those. So that's part of the process for us, is we see how they transferred it, and then make sure everything looks good.
So they've relieved themselves entirely of all their assets and liabilities.
Yes.
They're completely out of business.
Right.
Oh, interesting. Thank you.
We had 2 systems with significant economic assumptions. Corpus Christi Fire lowered their discount rate and payroll growth rate by 15 basis points, and Tezers lowered their discount rate by 25 basis points. Here we're showing funding progress over the last 6 years. You can see our board meeting dates dating back to 2020, when we had a 7.29 average discount rate, and it's decreased 36 basis points to 6.93% today. If you look at the yellow bars on top, you can see the funding periods above 30 years has decreased from 36 systems in 2020 down to 15 systems today. And then systems that have reached our 2040 target of a 15-year funding period or lower, we had 25 systems in 2020, and we're up to 39 such systems today. This is every system with a funding period of 30 years or less. We expect these systems to move to the left and up as their funding status improves. And the hope is that by 2040, all of our systems will be in this upper left quadrant. This shows systems with funding periods over 30 years, and this is based on the last valuation report that we received. But we know that many of these systems have made improvements since that last report, and we can see that on the next slide. But for this slide, we had Tesers and McAllen Fire drop off, and we've had TRS added on to it since December. The TRS addition was expected based on the teacher pay increase bills that were passed in the 2025 legislature. So we have 4 systems remaining and some of these may come in under 30 years with their next valuation report, but none have made any actual structural changes to their contributions or benefits. If they come in under 30, it'll be due to positive investment returns.
May I ask a question?
Ms. Dush, please.
The San Benito, San Angelo, Arlington, are they using, are they on the outer limits of actuarial, the discount rate used in the valuation? I mean, is this a realistic calculation here, or are they using fairly aggressive assumptions?
San Angelo and Harlingen are on our list of systems that are over a 7.5% discount rate. So we have 3 systems left, and San Angelo and Harlingen are 2 of those. Orange Fire is the other one.
So if they used a lower discount rate, or perhaps even a more conservative pay raise increase, their remaining funding period would be much greater than what is shown here.
That is correct.
At this point, I really would like to commend the work that you've done, David, in really kind of watching over and working with these plans. I mean, what has been accomplished here is really, I think, incredible in getting down the funding periods. I would certainly like to see more improvement in the funded status of so many of these plans. But again, just getting the bulk of the plans under 30 years, the funding period has been an incredible improvement over the years. Thank you.
Yes, without a lump sum upfront contribution, we're not going to see immediate increases in the funded status. We'll see it show up in the funding period first. And then, we've talked a lot about negative amortization. And then once those systems get under, say, 20 years funding periods, then we'll start seeing them get out of negative amortization, which means we'll start having the funded status increase.
I do continue to have a concern about the low funded status and the fact that so much of the improvement in the funding period is due to expected future contributions. And I still am concerned about the fact that so many plans have very small or even negative employer normal costs, meaning that the employer's contribution is really going to the unfunded liability, really not helping to fund the benefits for current employees. So I still, while I see that we've made incredible progress, I still think there's room for improvement. Thank you.
But so far, I will say that any systems that have increased the contribution rates have stuck with it. So far, we haven't seen anyone back off of those increases to where it wasn't as meaningful as we had hoped.
Thank you.
So this is system overview by type. I'm going to concentrate on the funding periods. So the median funding period for statewide is 14, which is under our 2040 target of a 15-year funding period. The TELFRA funding period has been decreasing steadily each time I show you the slide, so they're down to 25 years. Municipal systems are at 17, which is very close to our 2040 target, and then 810 systems are well below at 11 years. This is looking at a 6-year trend. Each system type has made substantial progress in reducing their funding period, with statewide reducing it almost 17 years over that 6-year period. TELFRA systems reducing it by 11 years. Municipal systems right on track at 6 years, and then 810 systems at 4.7. It's, of course, harder for the 810 systems to reduce their funding period significantly anymore because they're already pretty low. We're down to 5 systems with funding periods over 40 years. I can definitely remember showing you longer lists in the past. So we'll soon be down to 1 or maybe even 0. So the top 4, Nacogdoches, Texarkana, Dallas Police and Fire, and Marshall Fire, all have agreements in place. And then Harlingen Fire, I would expect with positive investment returns that we've been seeing for other systems, that they'll at least be under 40 with the next valuation report, but we'll see. So we could very likely just not have this slide again. These systems have both a low funded ratio and a long funding period compared to FSRP thresholds. As a reminder, any evaluation report dated September 1st, 25 or later that has both a funded ratio below 65% and a funding period greater than 30 years will trigger an immediate FSRP. But you can see most of these systems have green notes signifying that they have dealt with their issues. So we have our 3 orange systems remaining, which are Harlingen Fire, San Angelo Fire, and San Benito Fire, which are all at-risk systems. These are systems with fund exhaustion years, which means based on current contribution levels, their assets are projected to be depleted prior to paying all promised benefits. But this is as what's shown in their last financial report. We know that many of these have changes since then. So Midland Fire completed their FSRP. Tezer's had legislation. Wichita Falls Fire completed their FSRP. Texarkana Fire, we believe, has avoided an FSRP. And Nacogdoches completed their FSRP. So that leaves us with only San Angelo Fire remaining. These are systems with funded ratios below 50%. As you can see, most have an orange asterisk signifying they have a funding period below 30 years. But the ones that don't include Marshall Fire, which completed their FSRP, Dallas Police and Fire, which has their agreement in place, and then Plainview Fire, which is our legacy FSRP. So this is the situation Ms. Dush was commenting on. They have their funding period below 30 years, but it hasn't shown up in the funded ratio yet. These are systems with funded ratios above 50%, but retiree funded ratios below 100%. And again, most of them have this orange asterisk, but the 3 at the top do not. But we know that each of Sweetwater, Beaumont, and Wichita Falls Fire all completed their FSRPs. These are 2 systems where it's been a while since we received a valuation report. The last one was January 1st, 2023. But since we created these slides, University Park has sent us their valuation report for 24, and then we expect to receive Atlanta Fires this month after their board meets. So this is continuing a conversation from the last board meeting. Because Telfar sponsors often match contribution rates to TMRS, we're looking at the differences by employee type in TMRS. So normally you hear me talking about economic assumptions and economic experience, but here we're really focused on demographic assumptions and demographic experience, which is also very important, and we're specifically focused on employment termination rates. So we know in the TMRS valuation report that firefighters have significantly longer expected career longevity than general employees do. In fact, a firefighter is over 2.5 times as likely as a general employee to reach retirement age. And members who do not reach retirement age often forfeit the sponsor match. This includes anyone who leaves before they become vested, and it also includes a significant portion of members who are vested but voluntarily forfeit that match in order to take an early lump sum. So since firefighters are least likely to forfeit that match, they cost the most. So these are the formulas for Telfar cities. You can see most systems use a 7% contribution rate and a 2-to-1 match. That includes 34 out of the 42 systems, and 27 out of those include a COLA. We are also seeing increasing contribution rates. The 2025 session included a new 8% contribution rate, and we've already seen 2 sponsors take advantage of that, and we would expect more to follow. So what we did is we estimated the normal cost for a 30-year-old hire using a 7% contribution rate and a 2-to-1 match with no COLA. And without forfeitures, we would expect that number to be 21%. If the members are putting in 7% and the system's putting in 14%, we'd expect the cost to be about 21% per year. But because of the forfeitures that we've discussed, the numbers come out significantly less. And so what we see is about 2% higher percent of pay for firefighters versus other employees. So we'll talk about that more on the next slide. So we know that TELFRA sponsors often target the same contribution rate for TMRS and TELFRA. Yeah, but the TMRS system does not include firefighters, while TELFRA does. Now, they do often add 6.2% if the TELFRA members do not participate in Social Security, while the general members do. But the sponsors should definitely consider this higher firefighter cost in TMRS when determining an appropriate contribution rate for the TELFRA system. Furthermore, matching like this will not work long term. The average TMRS system is probably around a 15-year funding period, while a TELFRA system is generally closer to a 25-year funding period. So there's going to come a point where TMRS systems are fully funded and TELFRA systems are not. And when you look at how you fund the normal costs plus a portion of the unfunded liability. So when the TMRS rate becomes just the normal cost with no unfunded liability, that would be a huge disconnect to the TELFRA system, which still needs to pay the normal cost plus a portion of the unfunded liability. We would not want sponsors to, because they're no longer having to fund the unfunded liability for TMRS, to no longer fund that unfunded liability for their TELFRA system. So the other thing I'd point out is that had these TELFRA sponsors been contributing in ADC similar to what they've been contributing to TMRS, had they been doing that for their TELFRA systems, then those TELFRA systems would likely be on a closer path to TMRS with a similar funding period. But we are where we are, and so I think just want to educate these sponsors on this issue.
Members, what Mr. Fee is describing here really is a fundamental structural funding deficit for firefighters in these health points. Have we engaged these plan sponsors that I mentioned the TMRS rate?
We have not yet.
Can we?
Yes, yes, we can definitely reach out to these sponsors and try and educate them on this issue as to why contributions may need to be higher for TELFRA.
And I also want to point out that our 2022 maintenance review for Wichita Falls Fire, that is one of the issues discussed in that.
If I could just make a comment.
Ms. Josh, please.
The way I would look at it very simply is the benefits for TELFRA are different than TMRS. The demographics for the people who are participating in the TELFRA plan are completely different than for the TMRS members overall. So the fact that you're contributing the same amount to both plans, different asset bases, different people, different benefits, just doesn't make any sense. And so that would be my simple way of understanding this. This doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well said. I agree with that characterization. So the staff will formally reach out to the plan sponsors who are funding their TELFRA plans this way.
Yes, we'll reach out on both issues. One, that matching really isn't the logical way to approach it, but also given that they do match, a lot of these sponsors, they care. What they always want to know, I think a lot of times they want to contribute as if their TELFRA system had gone into TMRS. And what I don't think they understand is that even if that were to have happened, these firefighters would cost more in TMRS. And so no matter how you look at it, whether they match or not, the contribution rates should be higher to these TELFRA systems.
Thank you.
So now we'll look at an update on the lump sum assumptions for systems who have not yet adopted the 2024 guidance. So we did discuss with the actuary and administrator for THA, and they agreed to go to each of these three systems individually and then discuss it with them and then get back to us. We discussed with Colorado River Municipal Water District, and we talked to that general manager who's going to research the issue further and then get back to us. The smallest one on the list is Refugio County Memorial Hospital, and we have not yet actually got a hold of them. The largest system on the list was CPS Energy. We discussed this issue with their VP and actuary. They do understand that currently members who receive a lump sum receive a smaller value than members who elect an annuity. But they do have a complication in that sometimes an annuity formula wins, where just like we've been talking about, if they use more modern assumptions, the lump sum would increase. But they also have an accumulated contribution formula that starts out in the form of a lump sum that they convert to an annuity. So then if they use the more modern assumptions, that would actually decrease the annuity. And so they're reluctant to change the assumptions in a way that would decrease that annuity. And so we've suggested they pursue a more creative solution that would allow them to achieve the desired result for each member. And so they have indicated that they'll continue to evaluate the options.
Do you have confidence that they're capable of coming up with some creative solutions?
I mean, we discussed some preliminary ones. I think there's always a lot to consider with these, including how well the administration system can handle it and so forth. So I don't know what the outcome will be. I just know that they're going to consider it.
We'll see.
If I say, like,
Madam Chair,
I mean, I think just the fact that we inform people of this issue and continue to suggest that they notify and communicate with the recipients, right, of the issue so that people can make an informed decision when they're making these life decisions. I view that as a win.
Yes, I think CPS was always one that was actually at least disclosing the assumptions, but when people make the decision.
I fall more on the camp of strong and Chris.
So we have a new entrant to our list of the lump sum discussions, which is Arlington Employees Deferred Income Plan. This was a plan for part-time and seasonal employees. They were terminating the plan and cashing out most of their employees, which was a sensible way to do it, considering the plan formula was already in the form of a lump sum. But they did offer a cash out option to retirees who are already in payment. And as you might expect, based on what we've been seeing, they were using life expectancies from 1984 and a relatively high discount rate. So we did meet with them just to educate them on this issue. And they did quickly decide to go ahead and recalculate those lump sums for the retirees. And it was a sizable increase in the lump sums that they're going to get.
That's a win.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So now we'll move on to the FSRP updates. So we had two status changes. Marshall Fire completed their FSRP, so they're no longer subject. And McAllen Fire came in under a 30-year funding period, so they're no longer at risk. So that leaves us with one system remaining, subject to a 30-year FSRP, which is Dallas Police and Fire. We have 4 systems at risk. We do expect Texarkana to drop off this when we get the next valuation report, leaving us with those 3. We have 1 remaining legacy FSRP, Plainview Fire. And then we now have several slides that show completed FSRPs. With Marshall Fire on this 3rd one, we put them on a separate slide because since they completed it after September 1st, 2025, they don't have the same protections from a revised FSRP that the ones on the other slides have. So that concludes my remarks.
Question for Mr. P about his report, the actuarial evaluation report, and also the FSRP report. A lot of information here, a lot of good slides, here that are not included as part of this presentation. I would encourage members to take time to look at that, and right near the end of six, behind tab 6A, is the usual reference. It's got an enormous amount of detail about the actuarial position, key actuarial assumptions, so on, of every public pension plan in the state. I would encourage members to take a look at that. I would also repeat the comments that were made earlier regarding the progress that pension plans in the state are making. I think it's really an all hands on deck effort. Plans have really made a genuine effort, bona fide effort to improve there, to make more realistic actuarial assumptions, use more realistic, conservative methods. I think the TOB staff has done a terrific job over the last decade of being a positive force, a force for good, and very helpful resource for these plans. I just appreciate all the effort that's gone into this overall improvement. Is just really quite stark and encouraging. Questions for Mr. Fee?
Mr. Brainer?
Ms. Dutch, please.
I would ask, will we have another in-depth, look at, a plan coming up in the next year or so? Are you looking for a plan to do an in-depth study of?
Yes, we are currently considering what the next intensive review will be. We had considered one system, but in talking to one of the firefighters and further discussing with the city, we believe that they are on a good path of discussions, and so the intensive review might only get in the way of that. And so we're still considering what the next intensive review will be.
Yeah, I would ask that as a part of any future intensive review, I would like to see the analysis that the plan's actuary has done regarding assumptions made by parties other than the actuary. So we know that in public plans, the trustees decide on the economic assumptions, and actuarial standards of practice require that the actuary do some analysis to determine that those assumptions are within a reasonable range of what they would choose. And so I would like to see that analysis from the actuary as part of any sort of future intensive review.
Okay.
Good point. Other comments or questions for Mr. Fee?
I have one question.
Madam Chair.
We still show Dallas Police and Fire as systems may be subject to the FSRP. I guess we understand based on public records and news articles that the city and the plan has reached a funding agreement. When do we anticipate receiving their FSRP?
I don't have a firm answer on that yet. It's our understanding that the system does not actually believe they are subject to FSRPs. And so we will discuss that with probably the system and the city, and I'll have to get back to you.
Thank you.
Who decides whether they're subject?
The legislature?
Yes, I mean, section 802, is it 1012? There's a section that specifically exempts specific systems from FSRPs, which is generally the statewide system. Dallas Police and Fire is not included on that list, but that system contends that they're not subject.
Thank you. We look forward to hearing more. Okay, Mr. Fee, thank you very much. I'd like to call on PRB staff member Brian Vernon to present item 6D, which is the non-compliant list. Mr. Vernon, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, members. I am Brian Burnham, PRB Analytical Services Team Lead, and I will provide you with the update on reporting compliance. This slide contains information reported to us as of early February. These numbers reflect the fiscal year 2024 data for most of our systems, with a few who have already been subject to report their 2025 data. So I'll start off by saying I'm pleased to inform you that the University Park Firemen's Relief Retirement Fund has submitted the reports as of last week. We are currently in the review process of these reports, which is why they still remain on this list, as we have not confirmed that everything is in there yet. Once we have completed our review, we will remove the system from the non-compliance list and will send a letter to their sponsoring entity notifying them that the system is now in compliance with state reporting requirements. There has been, excuse me, there has been no update since our December meeting on the status of the 2024 audit for Nagadoches. The system maintains that they are waiting on their auditor to finish the report and will submit it to us when it's available. I just want to point out that because the system has a June fiscal year end, the reports are due to us in January of every single year. So the 2025 report is also late at this time, but it does not appear on this list yet, as they would be considered over 60 days non-compliant at the beginning of next month, March. On this list, currently only the city of Laredo is non-compliant with the actuarial audit requirement for the Laredo firefighters retirement system. Staff had spoke with the city after our December board meeting to discuss the audit requirement, but we have no further information since recent attempts to reach out to the city for follow-up have not been successful. This final slide provides an overview on the reporting deadlines for the 2025 fiscal year reports. Just one systems reports are due actually tomorrow. And then the reporting deadline for the August fiscal year end systems, which includes our statewide systems and the City of El Paso Retirement Trust, will be due at the end of March. And if there are no questions, that would complete my report.
Question for Lynn Burnham on non-compliance. Seems like these lists are shorter than they used to be.
Yeah.
That's progress. Thank you very much. Members, on to item 6B. This is a rule review. We'll be taking action on this. Rule review and possible need for SSRP rule revisions, statutory recommendations, including consideration of possible action of the rule review of 40 TAC Chapter 610. I'd like to ask B and Counselor Tamara Ehrenstein to please come forward. Welcome. Who goes first?
I will get us started. So good morning, Chair and members. Tamara Ehrenstein, General Counsel, presenting with David Fee on the FSRP rule and statute review. So first, an overview of our presentation. We'll provide some background on the FSRP requirements and where we currently stand. We'll provide an overview of the rulemaking process and the timeline, as well as the opportunities for stakeholder feedback. We'll go over some initial concepts for potential rule and statute changes at a high level as the actuarial committee continues to work on the rule project. I want to note that in your packet, you'll find the current rules, as well as a draft of the notice of intent to review the rules that is up for consideration today. So first, the purpose of this review is twofold. Statute requires that all agencies review their administrative rules every 4 years to determine whether the initial need for the rule still exists, and then agencies must either readopt with changes, or repeal the rules. The PRB reviewed all other chapters of its rules in 2023 to 2024, but the FSRP rules were initially adopted in 2022, following the statutory changes to the FSRP requirement in 2021. So this is the first 4-year rule review for these rules. The initial deadline for FSRPs under the revised statute recently passed, as you are aware, on September 1, 2025. So this current review is well timed for the board to evaluate how the current rules are working, changes that may be needed. And additionally, the rule review process also poses an opportunity for the board to identify potential statutory recommendations that cannot be accomplished through a rule change, but may merit legislative action. I will hand it over to Mr. Fee.
So I'm David Fee, the staff actuary. So here we're looking at an overview of the key requirements for FSRPs that are triggered on or after September 1st, 25. So in the context of PRV rules, these are the four main areas to consider. We want to look at, how well they're defined in statute and how well they've been working so far. And so those four things include the due date, which is now 2 years after the triggering evaluation date, the regular progress updates that are due, the required member communications, and then the FSRP submission form. Oh, wait, press the wrong button. So for progress due September 1st, 25, though there's room for improvement, overall the FSRP process has been working fairly smoothly through September 1st, 25. That includes 12 systems that completed their FSRPs and 2 more that were due by September 1st that were not quite complete at that point. Most systems did provide regular updates as required, but they tend to question what information should be included in those updates. So that's definitely a potential issue to address in the rules. The FSRP submission form worked really well. It seemed to really make sure the systems included all the required documentation. So that's probably not a huge area of concern for the rules. And then regarding the communications requirements, we're uncertain whether systems were adhering to that because there's no rule yet that requires them to actually provide documentation to the peer. So there's 3 key differences after September 1st, 25. There's the new immediate trigger that we've been discussing for a few board meetings now. There's no more voluntary FSRPs, so the one system that submitted one will be the only system. And then the main change is the required full funding date. So we've been focusing on systems proving that they're going to be fully funded by September 1st, 2055, and that was based on the due date of September 1st, 25. Now they're required to reach a 30-year funding period within 2 years of the triggering valuation date. So the triggering valuation date is January 1st, 26. They must reach a 30-year funding period by January 1st, 28. And so an FSRP would need to demonstrate full funding by 2058. So theoretically then, a system with a 32-year funding period as of January 1st, 26 could satisfy an FSRP by saying, well, we're going to be fully funded by January 1st, 2058. We're already on track for that. And I do think that's okay. I'm not sure that would be advisable for those systems to do it that way because they'd be putting themselves at extreme risk of a revised FSRP if they don't get substantially below a 30-year funding period. I'll hand it back to Ms. Ehrenstein.
All right. So now the rulemaking process and timeline. In January, we presented on this effort to the Actuarial Committee and received feedback from the committee on the initial concepts presented. The bolded date is today. We are presenting to the full board. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, you'll find in your packet the draft notice of proposed rule review for your consideration. If the board so approves, this notice will be published in the Texas Register to alert the public that the board is reviewing Chapter 610 FSRP rules. This publication triggers a 30-day formal public comment period, and we also intend to seek additional stakeholder feedback on the current rules and statute and the initial concepts presented to the board. In April, we will appear before the Actuarial Committee again to present more detailed potential rule changes and statutory recommendations, and then do another round of stakeholder input. We would present draft rules to the full board at the July meeting for your consideration. If the board approves the draft rules for publication, that would begin another 30-day formal comment period. And at the September board meeting, the board could adopt any potential rulemaking and legislative recommendations. In the end of the calendar year, staff would work on implementing any rule changes, such as providing guidance and training on any changes for stakeholders, and include any statutory recommendations from the board in the biennial report, which will be published in November. So just a bit more on stakeholder engagement. Our rulemaking process, as always, allows for ample opportunity for stakeholder engagement, as I mentioned, with both the formal comment periods required under the Administrative Procedure Act, but also multiple opportunities for informal stakeholder feedback to ensure that we get feedback on the rule changes being considered. So as part of these efforts, we will coordinate with TexPERS and TELFRA on reaching their members. We do plan to present at the TELFRA Peer Review or Educational Conference in May on this FSRP rule project. And we always distribute our calls for stakeholder feedback as broadly as possible to our full stakeholder contact list. But we do also anticipate some additional targeted outreach to those systems and sponsoring entities who have been through the FSRP process. And at this time, I will turn it back over to Mr. Fee.
So later we'll look at some potential statute changes in the Texas Government Code, but first we're going to look at potential rule changes in the Texas Administrative Code. Now, the proposed changes to many of these sections have only relatively minor wording changes, so I'm going to focus on the sections with the more substantial consideration. So 610.15 is the required disclosure of inadequate financing arrangement to plan members. As a reminder, Government Code Section 802.106 says that systems must disclose an inadequate funding arrangement to members. Then our Administrative Code 610.15 clarifies that if an actuary has said the funding period is above 30 years, then they have deemed it to be an inadequate arrangement. So putting those two together, if the funding period is greater than 30 years, the systems must notify the members. So the PRB could consider adding a requirement the systems provide a copy of those communications to the PRB so that we can ensure systems are complying with the requirement. We could also include guidance and or sample language so that systems know what information to include. Six 10.20 is again 610 and 20, 610, 20, and 21 are more systems, more slides that just have minor wording changes. So I'm going to move on to 610.30. So this is the completion criteria for the FSRP. So we could consider clarifying the deadlines for formulating an FSRP and reaching full funding. In this next bullet, if you look at A and B, we've mostly been focusing thus far on B, which is September 1st, 25. But going forward, we're going to be looking at A, which is the second anniversary of the triggering valuation date. So again, you trigger it on January 1st, 2026. It's due January 1st, 2028. Adding 30 years means they need to demonstrate full funding by January 1st, 2058. So we could clarify in a rule that any analysis must show a full funding date within 32 years of the triggering valuation date. Or in lieu of a rule, we could incorporate that language in guidance or also in the letter we send when an FSRP is triggered.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes, Josh, please.
I just want to be sure that if a plan showed up with the 32 years, that it does trigger the FSRP so that it has to show that it is funded within the 32 years. So many of the plans, when they provided their funding policy, seem to have a rolling 30 acceptance in their funding policy. What I don't want to happen is that if a plan has a 32-year funding period at one point for one valuation, and then 2 years later, it still has a 32-year funding policy, I want to be sure that that does then trigger the revised FSRP. I want that initial valuation to trigger some sort of requirement that they work on an FSRP and they don't get a free pass for 2 years.
Right. So anything with a funding period over 30 years would trigger an FSRP. And so it's just if they're between 30 and 32, it's technically possible that they could trigger an FSRP and satisfy it without making any changes. That said, if it stayed above 30, they would soon trigger a revised FSRP, which would bring them down to 25 and would require an ADC and many other things.
Right. I want to be sure that essentially they are forced onto that path.
Yeah, I think it's possible they could take that path, but I'm not sure it would be advisable.
Right.
Okay, good point. And as a reminder, the actuarial committee and full board will have an opportunity to weigh in on this to potentially include address that issue in our recommendations set forth, saying as actual change.
61031 deals with compliance with the progress updates. So far, the progress updates have varied significantly. Sometimes we receive letters that vary in level of detail. Sometimes we have regular meetings with the systems. Sometimes the updates are from just the system. Sometimes it's a joint letter from both the systems and the sponsor. We definitely greatly value those joint letters because it demonstrates commitment from all parties involved. More detail on the requirements, whether it's in rule or guidance, may be helpful. We could also clarify the dates for the progress updates and also strike out some outdated references because we do not need progress updates for the voluntary FSRP that has been completed. So now, after we've discussed the rules, now we'll talk about potential changes to the statute. So the first bullet deals with many municipal systems where they require legislation to make their changes. So it then becomes redundant to make them show demonstration that the city council has approved it and the system board has approved it in minutes. The current statute requires for an FSRP that those minutes be provided, but really for a system who's already had legislation enacted to fulfill the FSRP requirement, it may not really be necessary to have in statute that those systems also show us minutes from a board meeting and city council meeting. And the next bullet deals with non-compliance. So some potential consequences of non-compliance could be a standalone biennial report to the leadership offices. Could also include routine progress reports to the appropriate standing committees, or possibly other consequences as you see fit. And the last bullet, most systems are under 802.2015, but one system, Fort Worth Employees Retirement Fund, is under 802.2016. But now that that system has graduated from their legacy FSRP, it might make sense at some point to combine 2015 and 2016 into one. So that concludes our remarks, unless there are any questions.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Board. Now, I would remind members that the FSRP is relatively new statute. I think it's been the last 15 years. So ask this is the first one. And as we saw earlier, the FSRP really has played an important role in improving the condition of the national without question. This is maybe the third go round we have with rule reviews. So even though this seems a bit dry, it's really rather consequential. We're looking forward to getting feedback from stakeholders. Actually, the committee will have an opportunity to consider that feedback and weigh in as well as the full board. And we appreciate your attention to feedback now and on this issue. So we are pleased for action. If there are no other questions, I will entertain a motion to publish a notice of intent to review the rules contained under Title 40, Part 17 of the Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 610 in the Texas Register.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Shook, seconded by Ms. Livy. Further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The notice of intent will be published. Thank you, Ms. Ehrenstein and Mr. Booth. I will now ask Ms. Judge to introduce item 7. Thank you.
I will in turn ask Ashley Rendon to present item 7A.
Good morning, members. Ashley Rendon, Deputy Director. Today, I am presenting in Jasmine Loomis' stead. She will be the project manager for this as the Education and Communication Specialist for the PRB and main point of contact on the education program. As a reminder, at the December meeting, the board asked staff to look into possible recommendations, statutory or otherwise, to encourage improved MET compliance. Today, I'll give you a bit of a background on the MET program, and agency efforts so far, and then go over this project's timeline. For some background on the MET requirements, MET cycles used to be based on individual trustees or administrator start dates, ultimately creating individualized cycles. During rule review, which I'll cover more a bit later in this presentation, staff heard from systems it could be pretty challenging to manage their trustees' training requirements based on those cycle dates. But also with about 700 trustees and administrators making the same making for the same number of cycles, it was not easy for PRB staff either. So the board adopted changes to the MET rules to make this process more efficient by streamlining these cycles to all follow the calendar year. In a trustee or administrator's first year of service, they are required to complete 7 core credit hours in the 7 core content areas. And so this did not change through our rule review. Every year after their first year of service, trustees and administrators must complete 2 hours of continuing education annually. This did change, but it just moved from 4 hours required every 2 years to 2 hours required every year. We wanted to also note that statute does not currently have any language specific to MET compliance, so any statutory recommendations adopted by the board would be proposing new additions to statute. Statute does give the PRB authority to adopt rules on the program, so most of the compliance requirements are in our rules. For a little more background on our efforts concerning compliance, in March 2024, staff presented on the core compliance project, which aimed at increasing trustee and administrator compliance with the first year of service requirement. Compliance with the core year requirement is so important because if it's not completed, trustees or administrators are unable to move on to their continuing education cycle. This could lead to trustees getting far behind on training or, a cycle of perpetual non-compliance. During the project, staff reached out to retirement systems regarding their trustees' non-compliance and provided ongoing technical assistance to help bring them into compliance. From late 2023 throughout 2024, PRB staff worked to review and essentially overhaul the MET rules, focusing on making the program more efficient and effective. The board adopted the new rules in September of 2024. The rule changes included additions and updates, streamlining compliance, and other MET functions. One of those included the next item, which requires us to annually report on compliance. At the December board meeting, PRB staff presented the first annual MET compliance report as required by the newly adopted MET rules. Previously, compliance was only reported in the biennial report, which is a statutory requirement, and due in November of even-numbered years. So as I stated earlier at that same meeting, the board directed staff to research possible statutory recommendations and any changes that the agency could make to improve compliance. And this slide serves as a reminder of the compliance numbers we shared at the December 2025 meeting. As you can see, each system type has seen an increase, some of them less than others, but still an increase in MET compliance over the past 3 reports, so 2022, 24, and 25. So currently our IT projects are prioritizing the implementation of the substantial changes to the MET program in regard to how systems submit reports and what information is available to them, which we hope will positively impact compliance. Specifically, changes to the reporting portal or the pension online reporting tool will allow system administrators to see trustee compliance right on their dashboard. Currently, systems must request these types of reports, and then staff has to create the report manually. And so you can imagine with 100 different systems periodically checking in on their compliance status, that could take a lot of time for our staff. And so these updates will not only make the information readily available for those systems on their dashboard, but it will also free up staff time to be able to dedicate it to other areas of the MET program, such as creating courses. System administrators will also be able to input training reports and update the PRB on new outgoing trustees directly through the portal. Currently, systems can only upload PDFs. And so the process right now is once we receive the PDF, staff will enter that information from the PDFs into our internal database. And then the information in the database will go through a quality control check by another staff member before we let the system know whether or not they're compliant. The portal updates will allow the information to be directly entered into the fields of the dashboard. And then users, once they hit submit, it goes straight to us on our administrative end. Our staff can review that information, and if we accept it, it goes straight into our database. If we need more information, that is also communicated through the dashboard to the user. And so they know whether it needs to be corrected or, they need to submit more information. And so again, we're keeping kind of the same amount of work for the systems. They're entering the same information that they now enter into a PDF into the dashboard, but it will be greatly reduced for our staff, because it will eliminate one of the data entry, and it will also eliminate one of the reviews that we do, because we're essentially reviewing the work that's put into the dashboard. It will provide more prompt information on compliance to systems through their dashboard as well. For this project, and in line with how we typically prepare projects like this, we want to work with stakeholders to get input on recommendations and other possible changes to help improve MET compliance. This will include a stakeholder meeting and requests for stakeholder feedback throughout the project. Staff will also assess internal procedures and resources we provide to systems that could be changed or updated to encourage compliance. And the project could end with the board potentially adopting statutory recommendations or guidance. And I'll talk more about the specific timeline on this slide. And so today's meeting kind of serves as a kickoff for this project. We intend to hold the stakeholder meeting in March, and so stakeholders will be asked to RSVP for that meeting soon. At our next education committee meeting, which will be in March or April, we will present initial recommendations and other possible changes to the committee. And then after that committee meeting, staff will create a draft of the initial recommendations to send out to stakeholders for a first round of feedback. At the July meeting, we'll present the draft recommendations to the full board, include any feedback received from stakeholders. And during this meeting, the board will have the opportunity to provide any feedback on the draft. And then we'll send it out again for a second and final round of feedback after the July meeting. In September, staff will present final recommendations to the full board for potential adoption. And so any legislative recommendations, we would include those into our November biennial report to the legislature. And so this is all I have for this item, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or discussion from the board?
I have a question, please.
Yes.
Thank you. In reporting their progress on meeting these requirements, do we work on the honor system, or the systems required to provide proof of that they've completed their courses?
No, the administrators of the systems are required to keep those certificates or any of that proof. I believe we have the ability to audit those if we would like, but otherwise they just report the courses on the PRB 2004.
So we're relying on the honor of the systems.
Yes.
Thank you.
I also have just a suggestion, and that is, as you start to meet with stakeholders, rather than just portraying this as a requirement, MET as a requirement of Texas statute, I would really like people to remember the fiduciary responsibilities that a trustee has. They're managing millions of dollars taken out of members' pockets, out of taxpayers' pockets, and I would like to make sure that this is cast in a very responsible way, way beyond just like the legislature is making you take education classes. I want them to really understand that if they're gonna manage millions of dollars, they have to be educated, they have to know what they're doing. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Madam
Thank you.
Chair, this is Christopher.
Yes, Christopher.
I would also just reiterate that, you know, it's irresponsible to be managing this kind of money and not be willing to sit and go through the process of education and information and knowing what other plans are doing, what other things are happening in the world, and make sure there's a very clear understanding of the livelihood impact on the people that we serve. So, you know, we've talked about this a lot. It's gotten better, but, you know, this is something to where it should be 100% compliance in every respect, just because the stakes are too high. So I'll reiterate what was said and just say we're going to continue to focus on this area.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you, Ms. Rendon.
Thank you.
And this concludes the work of the Education Committee.
Thank you. At this time, I'll call on Mr. Burnham to walk us through agenda item number 8, which is the 2026 self-promotion report.
Good morning once again, board. I am Brian Burnham, the PRB's Analytical Services Team Lead and the PRB's TELFA Specialist. And I will be providing you with a quick overview of our 2026 TELFA report. The Pension Review Board publishes the TELFA report every even numbered year. As each odd number year, we provide a guide to public retirement systems, which covers all the systems prior to the legislative sessions. The TELFA report focuses on providing comparative and aggregate data for the 42 TELFA systems, and it reflects the most recent data available, which will be fiscal year 2024 for this year's report. This report is meant to be used in conjunction with the Pension Review Board's data center to provide a more holistic overview of the data that we have on each TELFA system. So we began compiling the data for this report in January. We finalized an initial draft earlier this month. We sent that draft to the 42 systems last week, which is our practice to give systems an opportunity to provide us with any feedback, questions, or updated reports prior to our publication. The deadline for any feedback is the end of this week. And once we have made any necessary changes, we will finalize the report and publish it early next month. And if there are no questions, that concludes my report.
Any questions from the board? Very good, thank you. We'll turn it over to Amy Cardona for agenda item number 9.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, my name is Amy Cardona, the Executive Director of the Review Board. Item 9 is a quick executive director's report. Next slide. Item 9A is an update on the PRB's participation in upcoming industry conferences. First up will be the Texas Annual Conference, to be held in Dallas this year, the last week of April. David Fee has been requested to provide an actuarial presentation. Currently, those topics are to be decided. Second, we've also been asked to speak at the TELFA Peer Review Educational Conference, as Ms. Aaron mentioned earlier. And that will be the first week in May. Tamara, Aaron and David Fee will present on the ethics rule review project discussed earlier. We've had a good number of TELFA systems go through the ethics review process. And so we hope that getting this information in front of our TELFA stakeholders in person will be another way that we can get some really useful feedback to inform how we move forward. Next slide. And then item 9B is an updated fiscal year 26 operating budget, which reflects agency expenditures at the end of January. And that concludes item 9, unless the board has any questions.
I just have one question. Sure. Working through the operating budget, can you just walk us through the line items just for telecommunications services and I guess it's hardware and software, but it's like we're over what was budgeted in both categories, just what the expenses are and how you guys are working to rebalance the budget.
I think I'm gonna have to ask, our director of business operations, Tony Harkins, to come and, provide that, so.
Thank
For all we are very much on track of this.
I'm Tony Arguz. I'm the Director of Business Operations for the Pension Review Board. The question regarding telecommunications and the hardware and software. The telecommunications, if I recall off the top of my head, I believe is expenses related to the Department of Information Resources services that we have, which includes our telephone and the internet service. In addition, I believe, trying to recall that on top of my, I think what a lot of it is that we are budgeting for a certain amount, and we are actually making a few increases to to our expenses because of needs that we've had that we realized for this current fiscal year. So I think that that particular item, I can't recall if that was like a line item, like not part of the a section that's called other operating expenses. That's actually separate from that. The telecommunications expense, actually, I think, is part of the LAR, the legislative appropriation request. That particular line item is set in the LAR.
So the amount budgeted for telecom.
Yes, I remember. Yes, that is the case. Regarding the computer software and hardware, that was actually that's actually an other operating expense item. So we have the other operating expense set in the bottom of the bottom line items that you see there. What we've done is we've projected based upon previous expenses over the last 2 fiscal years to determine what is realistically what we would spend over the year for those particular items there. The items that are under other operating expenses is just a projection of the overall other operating expense line that's in the LAR. So for those, we basically have to project out, and then we try to change numbers if we need to within that line item based upon the needs of the agency.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Is it also that we did get one-time IT funding, so we have the purchases that we fall in those categories together?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you.
Then we'll move on to agenda item number 10, which is future meetings, agenda items, dates, locations, and other arrangements. So next meeting will be the actuarial committee meeting, and that meeting will be called on April 30th, with the location to be determined. The next full pension review board meeting will take place July 23rd, also with the location to be determined. Staff will also be scheduling, will soon be scheduling an education committee meeting for this spring with a date and location to be determined. The PRB website will be updated with information on meeting locations and if additional board or committee meetings are scheduled prior to our next school board meeting. There's no other business of the board and no objection. I'll move to adjourn this meeting. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.